أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. There are a couple of things I want to share with you from the verses that we looked at yesterday. What we're doing is we're going through the story of Isa alayhi salam in this first part of the lectures. Like I mentioned yesterday, to look at Isa alayhi salam, we have to kind of look at his mother as well, because her birth is also very significant in his birth. And so we looked at a lot of the verses yesterday that deal with Sayyidah Maryam alayhi salam. This is one of the verses that I showed you yesterday. So if you can follow along with me. This is chapter 3, Surah Al Imran, and verse number 37. It says, "Thereupon her Lord accepted the girl graciously, and reared her excellently, and charged Zechariah with her care." I just wanted to mention another instance of masterful detective work on the part of the commentators, especially Allama Tabari. If you look at the sentence, right, there are a couple of things here. It says, "Thereupon her Lord accepted the girl graciously." Right? That's the first part. The second part is that he reared her excellently and charged with Zechariah. Right? So you can divide the sentence into two parts. And each of these two parts is the answer to Hannah's prayers. Right? Let me show you how this works. Right? Allah, in response to Hannah's prayers for this daughter that she's been promised, for the daughter who has been born, in response to her prayers for the daughter who's been born, Allah answers the prayers immediately because she's sincere in her prayers. And one of the lessons we learned from yesterday's lesson was that Allah answers prayers if we qualify for that. If we purify ourselves and ask sincerely, then He always answers those prayers. And He answered Hannah's prayers right away. So let's go backwards one verse. If you look at, should I go right? Yes. This is number 36, right? So here it says, at the very end, "I hereby name her Mary," right, third line from the bottom. "I hereby name her Mary, and I seek refuge for her and her progeny from the evil of the outcast Satan." These are two prayers that Hannah is making for this newborn girl. The first one doesn't look like a prayer. "I hereby name her Mary." What Allah found was that the meaning of Maryam, or Miriam, or however it's pronounced in Hebrew, the meaning of Maryam is khadima, or abida, a girl who is devoted to serve, or who is devoted to worship. And that's the meaning, the literal meaning of the word Maryam. It wasn't first a name, it first had this meaning, and Hannah immediately, she chooses this name for her child. In reality, what she's saying is, I hereby devote her and dedicate her to the service of the temple, despite the fact that she's female and only males are allowed. I don't care. I've already made this another, and I know that from her progeny there's going to be this righteous son. Right? So I hereby name her Maryam, and by doing so, I make the dedication. I follow through on my oath, and I want to let her serve the temple. Right? So she's saying this, she's making the offer, she's waiting for God to accept it, and say, okay, I accept her as my servant in the temple. Right? In response to that, what does Allah say? "Thereupon her Lord accepted the girl graciously." Right? So immediate answer to Hannah's prayer for her daughter. The other prayer the mother made was, "I seek refuge for her and her progeny from the evil of the outcast Satan." I want them to be protected. Right? We have a lot of enemies. They're like our Ahlul Bayt. The prophets, the awliya of Allah, they all always had enemies. We saw some of the enmity yesterday. And especially because we're breaking a tradition here. We're putting a girl into the temple when it's only men there. Right? So there's a lot of room for enmity. Right? Please protect her and her progeny from whom this son is to be born that God has promised. And what does Allah answer? He says, and he reared her excellently. He made sure that she was raised in the best possible way. That's part of the protection that He's promising her. And He also made sure that the best guardian takes care of her. Another prophet of Allah, her uncle, Zechariah or Zechariah alayhi salam. Right? So that's the linkage between these two verses that Allah was able to decipher with a little bit of work, detective work. He was able to come up with this connection between these two statements. Another interesting thing to see is one of the verses we're going to look at today is where the angels are going to come to Maryam alayhi salam, and they're going to remind her of this favor that God has done to her. We read it today in the verses before the majlis started. Right? Inna Allah astafaki wa tahharaki. The angels declared to Maryam that Allah has chosen you and He's purified you. Right? Those two words, those two actions that God has done, He's chosen her and then He's purified her, those are also reflected in the same answer. He's basically reminding her of the answer that God had given to Hannah, her mother. Right? He accepted her and chose her for service in the temple when He said, thereupon her Lord accepted the girl graciously. That's the istifa of Maryam. She's Mustafat with a ta. Right? Our Prophet is Mustafa, she's Mustafat. She's chosen by God for service in the temple. And He also purified her, right, by protecting her from the evil of Satan. Right? Her mother had asked her to be guarded from Satan, so that sin never touch her, she never even think about sin, and she'll always be protected. Right? God protected her from that sin, and He made her ma'suma, right? Protected from all sorts of error and sin. Right? So in that way she's mutahhara as well. Istafaki wa tahharaki. And then He goes on, wastafaki ala nisa al-alam. Right, so these verses are very closely linked. Again, that same point I mentioned yesterday, that the Quran is extremely precise in the words that it chooses. And we have, because we know that the words are exactly as God revealed them, we can be very, very nitpicky and read between the lines as much as we want, according to the rules of language and so forth that the commentators are aware of. But you can really, really get a lot of information if you squeeze hard enough and if you look with the right eyes, the right glasses. Right? It's unlike any other book. If you look even at a book of hadith, right, even though hadith are very valuable as well, but we don't have that guarantee that a hadith is exactly with the same words as what the Imam said or what the Prophet said. Right? Because it was hard for the narrators to remember the words sometimes. They memorized many hadith. Sometimes they would interchange words and bring a synonym for a word and so forth. The Quran is not like that. Whatever words used, it's exactly the word that Allah wanted to be used in that particular instance. And so if you see that one word's used here and another word's used there, you can decipher a difference between those two words, and the commentators do that very, very carefully. Okay. Recite the salawat, please. Right, there are a couple of more verses that I want to share with you about Maryam, and then we'll move on and see what happens with the conception of her son. See if I can find this. Recite the salawat one more time.